Hello, fellow Northeast Ohioans. My name is Johnathan Holifield, Vice President, Inclusive Competitiveness at NorTech. NorTech is one of the nation's leading tech-based and innovation-based economic development organizations located right here in Northeast Ohio. This presentation will provide a general overview, briefly describing the importance, the economic importance of high-growth companies and describing how those companies are financed. First, let's describe the economic imperative. High-growth companies are an essential part of Ohio's job-creating mix. We have to recognize that in the 21st century, forces are combining, conspiring even, to render our economic rebound a far less job recovery. These forces are beyond our control. They're global forces, and significantly, they are forces of technology integration and adoption of American business. This is what I mean. In the 20th century, economic recovery was oftentimes triggered by increases in business productivity. Productivity increases meant new hiring, new jobs. Well, in the 21st century, that's no longer the case. Today's far less jobs recovery is significantly the consequence of increased American business productivity enabled by the adoption and integration of new technology. This results in untold efficiency and productivity gains, producing ever more goods and services with far fewer employees, far fewer workers. No doubt, there exists an imperative, a global economic imperative for Ohio businesses to adopt and integrate new technology. Absolutely beyond dispute. However, as Ohio businesses increasingly become more efficient and producing more with far less employees, that also means that many very talented Ohioans will have difficulty locating employment. So, what's to become of this wonderfully talented group of Ohioans? One solution is the increase in high-growth entrepreneurship among Ohioans. High-growth companies, generally described, grow at a faster rate than other companies. For a more academic definition, high-growth companies grow between 15 to 20% annually for a sustained period, perhaps 3 to 5 years. Despite their relatively small number, only about 400,000 in the nation, these very special companies account for a disproportionately high share of new jobs and wealth creation. For example, the Kauffman Foundation has found the following. In any given year, the top performing 1% of firms generates roughly 40% of new jobs created. Fast-growing firms, comprising, again, such a small percentage of total firms, only about 1% of all companies, generate roughly 10% of new jobs in any given year. To succeed, high-growth companies require access to leadership, management talent, clusters of peer networks, a robust infrastructure of service providers, and institutional and government support, and, very importantly, growth capital. Growth capital. So, the second part of my presentation is to build on that point, to describe briefly and generally how high-growth companies are financed, how they're financed to grow and create new jobs. This presentation focuses primarily on the role of private capital, which fuels high-growth companies. I'd like to thank our friends at Investopedia for helping me to frame out this progression. Initial startup. When an entrepreneur has an idea and begins to formulate plans around that idea, particularly if the idea initially is conceived as a growth model, a high growth model, the primary source of funding is often the entrepreneur's own resources, or what's called the friends and families network as well, from its personal resources. It could include maxing out credit cards. It could include mortgaging, taking a second or third mortgage on one's home, or selling other assets. But generally, the initial startup period is funded by the entrepreneur's own resources. Angels, angel investors. These are networks of individuals, entrepreneurs, former entrepreneurs who have cashed out and done quite well, who have an entrepreneurial zeal and want to bring to bear their personal and their professional expertise to help new entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Yes, they're looking for a high return on investment, no doubt. And angel investing generally ranges from about $150,000 way up to about $1.5 million. Seed investing. This now crosses over from an entrepreneur's own individual assets and network assets to angel and external assets to what is called venture capital financing. Seed finances is a form of venture capital financing. It's the first stage wherein companies they earn comparatively modest investments, and they're provided to finance the early development of a new product or a new service. An initial seed round can be made in a company, and it generally ranges from about $200,000 to about $1 million. Early stage and early stage companies. These are companies that are able to begin operations, but generally are not yet at the stage of commercial manufacturing and sales. Early stage finances really supports the preparation to position a company for ultimate launch. Operational startup. You have initial startup and operational startup. Initial startup is generally from the entrepreneur's own resources and network of resources. Operational startup is generally funded by external sources, such as we already have described. Operational startup supports product development, prototyping, initial marketing. This type of financing usually is provided to companies that have just been organized, or to those who have been in business for a short period of time but have not yet sold their product or service. First stage. Capital is provided to initiate commercial manufacturing and sales. You see how this progression builds up from individual network resources and assets to external assets to institutional private sector assets, primarily from the venture capital community that positions a company to launch and succeed. This first stage company are generally those that have been in business less than 3 years and have a product or a service or is testing or prototyping that production process. Later stage. Capital provided after commercial manufacturing and sales, but before an initial public offering. The product or service in production and it may be commercially available. The company demonstrates significant revenue growth and prospects for future growth, but may or may not yet be showing profit. Remember, the prospects for future growth can still position a company to earn later stage investment, even though it's not yet profitable, but it shows the promise for exponential returns on investment. Expansion. Capital provided for major expansion, such as physical plant expansion, product improvement, and marketing, all to yield greater exponential returns on this investment. Mezzanine, or some call it bridge financing, because it bridges all the financing mechanisms that we've talked about to date to what may be an initial public offering, the offering of shares to the public that generally, not always, but generally fuels explosive growth for the offering company. And that's the conclusion. We've provided a very brief overview of the financing mechanisms for high growth companies. We've also talked about the imperative for Ohio to create more high growth companies, because those special kind of entrepreneurs are responsible for a disproportionately high share of new jobs and new wealth. We've also talked about the fact that Ohio businesses must continually adopt and integrate new technologies. They must continually increase efficiencies. They must continually increase productivity. But at the same time, they're doing it and must do it with far fewer workers. Ohio is challenged to convert this pool of talent to high growth entrepreneurs. Not everyone will be one, but we need more. We need more high growth entrepreneurs. So let's keep our thinking caps on. Ohio is counting on each of us to create more high growth companies that will employ more Ohioans. Thank you.